Hi, and welcome to the To Be Read podcast, where we give honest reviews on viral books that you might see on social media and popular book review websites. This is Chris.
And Carison. And on this episode, we're going to be discussing The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon. So cozy on in, and let's see if you should add this book to your TBR shelf. Alrighty, everyone, welcome to today's episode. I know we took kind of a little bit of a break, but that's because I went and visited Chris and the rest of my family. If you don't know, we actually record these not in the same room. We're many states away from each other, so we took a little bit of a break to have a little bit of a vacation, and we wanted to be able to record this episode together. We just weren't able to. I wasn't there long enough to have time to record one. But let's get into discussing The Hurricane Wars. First, I'm going to read the synopsis. Of course, spoiler warning, we are going to be discussing this book, so there may be details in the book that you might not know about if you have not read this book yet. But let's get into it. All Taliesin has ever known is the Hurricane Wars. Growing up an orphan in a nation under siege by the ruthless Night Emperor, Taliesin has found her family among the soldiers who fight for freedom. But she is hiding a deadly secret. Light magic courses through her veins, a blazing power believed to have been wiped out years ago that can cut through the Night Empire's shadows. Prince Alaric, the Emperor's only son and heir, has been forged into a weapon by his father, tasked with obliterating any threats to the Night Empire's rule with the strength of his armies and mighty shadow magic. Alaric has never been bested. That is, until he sees Taliesin burning brightly on the battlefield with the magic that killed his grandfather, turned his father into a monster, and ignited the Hurricane Wars. In a clash of light and dark, their powers merge and create a force the likes of which have never been seen. Taliesin and Alaric both know this war can only end with them, but a greater threat is coming, and the strange new magic they can create together can only be the way to overcome it. Thrust into an uneasy alliance, they will confront the secrets at the heart of the war and find in each other a searing passion, one that could save the world, or destroy it. An exquisite fantasy brimming with unforgettable characters, sizzling enemies to lovers' romance, and richly drawn worlds, The Hurricane Wars marks the breathtaking debut of an extraordinary new writer.
I think that we should start off by, if you listen to the last episode, we predicted what this book was going to be about without reading the synopsis, just based off of the cover.
We were so wrong.
100%, 100,000% wrong. Um, 100,000% wrong.
Like embarrassingly wrong.
Yes. Yes.
Just a little recap. We thought Taliesin was a siren. And they were fighting on the water. And that she was going to... We're laughing because it's so bad. And that she was going to fall in love with, like, someone captaining.
This is honestly, I don't know if this is as fun for our readers as it is for us, but I rather enjoyed it and how wrong we were.
And, I found out within, like, the first couple pages how wrong we were. But, that's kind of the joy of not reading a synopsis of a book and just going off the cover, because I know a lot of people are all about covers, and especially when it comes to your favorite books, and if, like, your author gets picked up with a new publishing company and the new cover comes out, or they do limited editions, and covers are so important with books. And I think that can go to say that the cover makes sense as you read the book, but just first glance, no. It didn't make sense to us, obviously.
Yeah. So, with that said, now that we know that we were hellaciously off course with our predictions, what would your overall rating of the book be?
I gave this a 1. Um, yeah. I did not like this book. Um, I didn't finish the book. I DNF'd this at 25%. Um, we have agreed that if we DNF a book, we're going to at least 25% it. And I got strugglingly to 25% of this book. And I was very glad when I got there.
Yeah. I also give it a 1 star. I DNF'd the book as well, and it got to a point to where I like mathed it up so I could like get it down to the page that I had to stop reading on. Um, but yeah, we'll get into the nitty gritty in just a bit. Let's finish our ratings. So spice rating, um, for for me, I'm gonna give it like a 1 star because I like we only read about 25% of the book, and in that time frame there wasn't anything that just like sparked a chili pepper.
Yeah. I would say a 1. The only romance part for the first 25% is the wedding that happened in the very first chapter. And it was literally like you didn't see, you not see, but you didn't read anything except for the reception part that was happening. Um, so that would be the only romance that we had read was a reception for a wedding.
So if you have read and finished this book and you would give it a different spice rating, you should comment on this wherever you're listening and
Yeah.
let us know.
And um, last time we did what Goodreads has the rating at, and it's a 3.67 with over 15,000 rates on it. And there's almost 4,000 reviews that people have written for the book. It was also nominated for Best Romantasy of 2023. Um, so yeah, let's.
Yeah, do with that what you will. So, just to begin, like, I don't like to waste my time with reading if it's something that I like am not looking forward to picking up or am getting really confused where I have to reread pages over and over again just to kind of like try and deduct what the heck is happening. Um, I am quickly going to put it down. And that's exactly how I felt with this book is I felt like I was rereading chapters because I would get so confused on what was happening. I don't feel like there was a lot of description, not a lot of world building.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, so my background on this book, my sister-in-law um, was the one who actually recommended this book. She gave it to me a couple months ago because she had picked it up because she had saw that it was popular in book talk. She loves fantasy books, and she also DNF'd this book. And she saw how so many people were talking about it and was like, is this just a me problem or is this a book problem? So she gave it to me to read. I went into it with an open mind. That's how I go into all books, whether people have recommended them to me, if Book Talks recommended it, if Goodreads has recommended it. Because everyone has a different perception on books. Um, so I did not know anything about this book, right? And the biggest thing is on the cover of the book I have, it said, like, there's an author who, authors write reviews and they get put on the covers of books or whatever. And it talked about how this was a great world building book. I did not feel that. I was so confused about what this world was. Now you get the map that is in the cover of the book, which is great to kind of get a layout of the land, but you don't get the reasoning behind things, except for, like, yeah, you get the Hurricane Wars is doing, like, to deal with the power that Taliesin has, but you don't, like, on the cover of this book are the 7 moons, and all in the first 25% of this book that you understand about these moons is that you always see them and they have some type of power that you get from them.
Yes.
But you don't get, like, the significance of them and why they're on the cover of the book. And I just found that so confusing. Especially, I have not read a lot of fantasy books. And I have come off of reading Sarah J. Maas books where I feel like her world building, especially in ACOTAR, is phenomenal. It was a little confusing for me in Crescent City when I first started because that was my very first fantasy book. But she was able to put it in a way where you understood it. In this book, I did not understand any of this world building until I found out what this book was based off of.
Same. And then things just started piecing itself together, but you have to know where it came from.
Yeah. So if you haven't read this book and didn't know, or maybe you have read the book and you didn't know and you loved it, the author first originally wrote this as a fan fiction off of Star Wars, dealing with Rey and Kylo Ren.
Yes.
And
Raylo, if you will.
yes, I've watched Star Wars. I'm not like a diehard fan. Like, I haven't watched any of The Mandalorian, none of that stuff. So I kind of know, like the world setting of Star Wars, and I did not get that with this book to begin with until you get into, like, the characters and describing the 2 main characters of the book, and then you're like, oh, okay, now I understand who this is about.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the ships and like the different powers and like issues that arise like start to kind of like lay its place. But I have watched all of Mandalorian and like the Clone Wars and all of the Star Wars stuff. I would say that I am like a micro fan. I enjoy them, but I don't know a lot about them. And so it was hard for me. I was like asking my husband a lot of questions during this read because I was so lost pretty much the entire time.
Yeah. I the big thing that stands out to me about where I was lost on is the ships. The whole ships thing. Um and, like, the first chapter when she's escaping, well, she's not escaping, but she's going into battle after the Night Empire has come to start fighting at the reception. And she says they all get on these wasps, these ships that are wasps. Never describes what the wasps look like except for that they're small. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, look like an actual wasp, and that's why it's called a wasp. You don't know what the actual ship looks like, but then there's ships on the book, like the cover of the book, and I'm like, is that what it's supposed to look like? Or is that like a bigger ship?
Well, and it also didn't indicate, like, it talks about the moons and stuff, but it didn't indicate if these ships fly or if they're in water. And so, like, based off of the front of the book, like, I was envisioning like actual ships that fly, like in Peter Pan. But in the way that they described like the wasps, my brain was combating with itself because it wanted to envision like an actual spaceship. Because at this point, I had figured out that it was Star Wars themed. And so I don't know if that it helped me a little bit, but it also hindered me at the same time because then the book became completely about that for me.
Yeah. Um, I recognize some of the Star Wars stuff, like when it talks about, I don't remember the name. I was just trying to look up the name of the ship that it was, but like in that first chapter where she like looks up to see if like the some type of ship, like the it's like a straw. I don't remember. I feel really bad. Um, but anyways, it's basically what the Death Star would be, because she's like she looks up and makes sure that the ship is still there and hasn't come down, because that's like what would destroy them all. So obviously that'd be the Death Star, like
Yeah.
reference. And then when you get to meet Alaric, he has a mask on and um, a different voice from when he has the mask on to when he doesn't have the mask on. So obviously that's significant. Like Alaric is Kylo with his, he's not Darth Vader, but his Darth Vader ish mask that he wears in the,
Yeah. His like helm.
yeah, and her light power that she has that hasn't been seen since the Hurricane War started is obviously a reference to her being a Jedi, because um, like in Star Wars, if you have not, if you've never watched it, what was his name that killed all the, Anakin kills all the young Jedis, um, and the grandfather who started the Hurricane Wars killed all the people who had this light power. So there's that reference, and then um, Talison's the last one remaining, and she's a orphan. Like Rey was an orphan, and she's the last remaining Jedi after Luke Skywalker. So you see those references, um, but not if you didn't know this was a Star Wars fan fiction. At first, I didn't know it was a fan fiction, and then I started like feeling like, gosh, I feel like I've heard this story before. Like, there's too many similarities. And I called my sister in law and I was like, why do I feel like I've read this before? And she's like, well, I found out after I read it that it was a fan fiction. And I was like, oh, that makes sense after she told me. So I was put off because it sounded so familiar. I wasn't put off because it was a fan fiction. I was put off because it sounded so similar to something I've already known. And that kind of leads into like our opinions on fan fiction.
I think so. It's from my understanding that when it's a fan fiction, you're not technically supposed to like sell the actual fan fiction, which is why the story was curated into something else. And so that's why we have like actual ships. That's why we have different names. all of those kind of things, right? And she did change like the story a little bit. And I'm sure that there's more differences as you continue to read, which we didn't get to. But I think, in my personal opinion, with instances like this book, where we have two readers that know about Star Wars but aren't like huge fans, had no idea how to envision what was happening. And I think that's why it was so boring for me, was because when I'm reading, I play like a movie of what I'm reading in my head. And I could not do that. So it was me just trying to comprehend words on a page. Whereas, like, when it's done as fan fiction using names of characters and things like that, you just go and read it like a blog. It's so much easier to already have that world in your head. And so I think that there is a world out there where fan fiction made into actual books could be good, but I think that you have to really consider your piece and what it's missing if you decide to do that. I think that it almost might be harder because you already have like this knowledge and you don't know the difference between too much detail and too little.
Yeah. This I haven't really read many fan fictions. Um but this put me off from reading a fan fiction. I just don't okay, this is my thing. I think it's great when people want to add on to a story and turn something, if they have kids at the end and they write, you know, a life after those kids were growing up and stuff. But this is the thing, like I don't feel like you should change just a little bit of the story to be able to publish it. Like that's very off-putting to me. It feels like, especially if this is your first book, this is this author's first book, and she's turning this into a series. If it's your first book and you're doing it off of fan fiction, you need to come up with better storyline. Like start off like with your own thoughts.
Yeah, like taking the inspiration, but then making your own world and your own story rather than just curating something that many people have already wrote fan fiction about. Like Raylo is not a uncommon fan fiction topic.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they actually do end up together at the end of the last movie.
Um, I don't remember. It's been a hot second. I've only seen it once. But I don't think that they actually end up together. I could be wrong though. Don't quote us on that. If you're a Star Wars fan, don't hate us.
I think my husband said they did. Who knows if later on Disney, years down the line, is going to come out with another movie with them as like the main fighting couple, you know? And then like her story is just completely not useless, but
Right, but that's the whole point of fanfic, right? Like you're writing what you want to happen or what other people have wanted to happen. So like I have read fanfic for like different anime characters that don't actually end up together, but people want them to. And so it's not meant to be part of the storyline. It's just meant to be essentially like a little branch off of that. An alternate universe, if you will.
yeah, but do those people like I feel like the the 25% that we read is literally what happened in actual Star Wars. Like they're fighting against the Night Empire, which is the Republic fighting the dark side. Like I feel like all that actually happened. They meet and then like they get taken. That's where I ended off, is where they were taken by She found the only difference is she found her actual father.
Yes, and that was interesting to read about.
I liked that because that's one thing I did like about this book is that aspect of it is her actually finding her father. Um, I don't know, obviously, what happens with that in the book. If he's a good guy, if he's a bad guy, because I didn't finish it, obviously. Um, but I did feel bad for her, like Rey in actual Star Wars not having any family. So seeing that side, I did appreciate. Um, I could see why she was hesitant to like trust him, but I felt like the rest of what I read I had already watched before.
Yeah. I also feel though that like with Ray, that not having any parents kind of curated her into like what she had to become. And so I think that that's still portrayed in this book, but like finding her father, like obviously, like you said, we didn't read the rest of the book, so I don't know if it impacted her in a positive or negative way or if he was a good or bad guy, but I could see something coming of it. My biggest fear when I was reading that is that like it kind of felt a little like like it could just be extra pages.
Yeah, kind of like her friends Soul and oh, I don't remember the wife. I can't pronounce the wife's name, but the wedding
Oh
that
yeah, it
happened
started
in the
with a
first
K.
chapter.
Um yeah, the wedding and then
But she was pregnant and then Soul. I literally, when I first started reading that, I texted my sister in law and I was like, I swear, if Soul or the wife dies, I'm gonna be so mad. And she's like, I'm not saying anything. And then immediately Soul died.
yep.
And I was like, of course. And she's pregnant. Like that's just so sad. And then like you don't hear anything about them. Maybe you do later on in the book. But when I talked to my sister-in-law, she read about 50% of the book and she's like, you don't hear mention of the friend.
But did like all the way up until they announced that she was pregnant, weren't you confused on who was who? Because I would be like, "Oh, Soul's the guy. Oh, wait. Soul's the girl? Wait, is Soul the guy or the girl?"
Yes, and then you find out that Soul's the guy.
Yeah.
Um but I kind of felt like it was unnecessary. Like it didn't build anything in her character, like in Talison's character development. Like him dying, her relationship with her friend.
I feel like it was just like an intro to like be able to start somewhere. And so it was just like disposable characters so that we can just get into the drama. But I did also feel like it just came out of nowhere.
I just felt so bad that he died. Like
Right
why
after
did
their
he have to
marriage.
die? I know. I just I'm not a fan of I know in fantasy books people have to die. Obviously. It's what, you know.
Well, and like I don't feel like you really got to know his character well enough to just like make it heart-wrenching. So it was just kind of like feel bad. It's like he just got married. His his newlywed wife is pregnant and he just effing died. Like I don't have an emotional connection to him, but I feel bad.
That would be like my biggest thing I didn't like about this was him dying. And he wasn't even a big character.
I don't know. I feel like it could have been curated a little bit better that if Soul had to die, like for us to connect with him a little bit more, kind of like Sarah J. Maas. No. Uh yeah, Sarah J. Maas with like even the gosh,
With
in acad
Amorite.
yes.
Like you hated that chick so bad.
Amarantha. Is it Amarantha? Or
Yes. No, you're right. I'm wrong.
okay.
Like she had that whole character development and then of course like she dies at the end of the first book.
Yeah.
Is that right? that like you're just like, yeah, she deserved to die. She was a terrible
Yeah. And
person.
then Rebecca Yarros in like Fourth Wing. So
I haven't read it.
this is like trigger warning for anybody. And if you're on TikTok, you've already been spoiled this. But like one of the big characters that is not a main character, but he is a character that you fall in love with, dies. And I won't say his name, but like that one makes you cry. And so like there's ways to do it to where like if you're going to make a character die, either like make them essentially like an unnamed passive character or make
Yeah.
it something that makes you feel something. That's, I mean, I understand like how many people died in uh, George Martin. What is the show? A lot of people die in it.
Game of Thrones?
Um, so like there's a ton of people who die in Game of Thrones, but I also feel like each of those characters, you're either like, fuck yeah, or like, oh crap.
Yeah, like I know like the biggest thing, like I haven't finished Game of Thrones. But when I started it after the whole season like series ended. But I remember going into it, people were like, "Don't fall in love with any character."
You still do anyway,
Because
though.
yeah, but like in that show they make it in a way where the characters are important enough for you to like fall in love with them, to like be heartbroken, or you fall in hate with them and you're like, yeah, thank gosh he died. Like I just felt like you said, they either need to have a significant um building for you to like have emotion with them dying, or they just need to not be
Yeah,
named. Like other people died when the fighting started at the reception,
yeah,
and it was just like, oh, the soldiers were dying. Okay, that's like, yeah, that's sad. People are dying. It's a war, but you don't know the character.
right. I remember being like, so I had read that chapter a couple times because there was a couple confusing things happening, like not knowing if Soul was the guy or the girl. Um, and I remember when I like reading that he died, I was like, what the F? I didn't even have to go back and read it. I remember being frustrated. And like, I know we're focusing on this a lot, but we only read like a small bit. But yeah, I don't know. I felt like some of the things that are supposed to be notable went unnoticed by me because of the lack of world building and explanation,
Mm-hmm.
and the lack of me to have the ability to develop a picture in my head. But
Yeah.
then I also feel like there may have been things that, like Soul, that were insignificant that I tried to notice so that I could possibly remember this for later on in the book. Like, oh, this might have a
Mm-hmm.
significant, like, Soul, and I don't remember how to pronounce her name, but I'll call her Kay. Um, I thought that they were going to be significant people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole book opened up at their wedding.
Yeah. So you feel like they're going to be significant, and then they're not.
Yeah.
Maybe the wife is later on, towards the end of the book. I don't know. But what you said about the lack of world building, I forgot to mention this earlier. What really threw me off is the lack of like description, like you said, except for when it came to like certain things. She did describe certain things. Her walking through the forest. Talus said when she was walking through the forest after she was told she needs to leave to go find this light power that she has. She described in detail this forest that she's walking through. But then I felt like she wasn't describing important things. Like, yeah, and forest is, like, it's important to see what it looks like to understand what she's walking through. But, like, I felt like that wasn't as important as why it's called the Hurricane Wars. Like, why is it called that? If it's not fought on water or has to do with the weather, why is it called the Hurricane Wars?
Yeah.
Because that was a big thing for me when we were trying to figure out what the cover meant, was the name of the book. Like, titles of books are so important.
Well, and like the war was already in progress, so I feel like we should have had like a little bit of a history lesson early on what started this war and why they are calling it what they're calling it.
Maybe because she couldn't call it Star Wars.
Maybe the significance is the fact that they're all in ships, and that could be it.
I don't know.
I don't know either. It was yuck. But
Anyways, obviously we would not put this on our TBR shelf.
no, I would not recommend this to a friend.
Unless the only way I would recommend this is if you are a big Kylo Ren and Rey fan. Like, if you love them, ship them,
And
whatever.
know the Star Wars world.
Yes, go for it. No, otherwise no.
Yeah,
I would not read this
same.
book. Well, let's go on to something more
To
exciting.
move on.
Our next book. Um you announce which one we're doing.
Okay, so the next book that we are reading is The Spanish Love Deception uh, by, is that Elena Armas? Elena Armas, excuse me.
And again, we don't know anything about this book. Do you want to start your guess on the cover, or do you want me to?
You start, I started last time.
Okay. Just off first glance, the cover is there's a plane and some luggage, so obviously I feel like they're traveling. One of them is, maybe both of them are, in Spain, because it's called Spanish Love Deception.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go with the girl is traveling to Spain, and she meets I'm gonna say the guy is like rich because he's in a tux. Well, not a tux, but a suit, like a work suit. There's no tie, but he seems like he's putting off some millionaire, billionaire romance vibes. So she like runs into him in Spain because the cover says pretending to be in love never tasted better. So maybe they have to like fake be in love to get out of trouble or something. I don't know.
Okay, interesting.
There's some little details. So there's champagne glasses and there's also like a trophy. So I have no idea what the trophy means.
Yeah, I don't know about the trophy, but when I'm looking at this, I am thinking that I also assume that the girl is traveling.
Yeah.
And I think, based off of the toasting glasses, that she's going to a wedding, maybe of a family member, and that's where she meets this guy. And then something happens while they're down there, like maybe her family's trying to set her up or something like that. So she pretends like she is in love with or dating this guy. Maybe she met him on the plane. I don't know. Um, and so maybe they pretend to be in love, and maybe the trophy comes in for him, like the reason why he's traveling to Spain.
Mm.
So maybe he's like a sports star or some competition of some sort. Either that or he came from something and is coming home to visit family. Maybe they end up at the same wedding. But
I, for some reason, it's putting off like enemies to lovers.
yeah, I don't know. I think that it's like a, I don't even know what, like strange,
Trope it would be.
yeah, like strangers meet, pretend to be like each other's significant other to keep others away from them, or exes or something like that, and then they end up falling in love after a bunch of different like spats.
I'm going to go with they know each other and I think I like your idea of it being a wedding that they're at, but I think like they've known each other, maybe like, I don't know how, and they don't like each other and they're enemies to lovers, but they're pretending to love each other at this wedding. So like they don't get set up by people.
Yeah, maybe. We'll find out.
I'm excited. So obviously this is a romance book. So it is another romance, but we promise the next one will be a different genre.
Yes.
Very excited.
We already picked it out, too.
We did, but we're not going to give hints on that.
You'll have to listen to the next podcast.
Yes, to see if we're right on what we think this one is. Maybe, hopefully we'll be better with this this guess.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. But if you have any suggestions on what you would like us to read, let us know. Also, let us know what your thoughts are on the Hurricane Wars if you've read it before, if you've finished it, if you haven't finished it, if you want to read it. Did we sway you one way or the other? Let us know. Comment, message us, whatever. Follow us on all our social medias. All right, everyone. Have a good time. What? I don't. A good time.
Have a good time. Thanks for listening.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the To Be Read podcast. Make sure to tune in next time as we discuss The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas.